They were like, if you do this, you're an idiot. And I made my own decisions and I did it anyways. And then the specific example I was talking about before where they really called me out and essentially almost had like an intervention.
You have me interested. Yeah. You don't have to share it, but like on the whole intervention thing, I'm curious what the story is there. What's big enough to make someone need an intervention?
I hadn't thought about whether or not I wanted to share those details or not. It just organically came up.
Welcome to the Hey Brother podcast, where Catholic men share about real struggles. I'm Nick Clooney, your host, a Catholic psych mentor and the founder of Crafted for More, a mentorship practice dedicated to helping men live more radically free lives. Each week, I sit down with a man to hear his story about how brotherhood has shaped him, the struggles he's facing, and where he wants to grow. In addition to our weekly interviews, I share conversations with my brother Mitch. Subscribe and follow so we can walk this journey together. We want your help to build a stronger, authentic Catholic brotherhood. Whose flag's behind you?
Flag. Oh, it was flown over the Capitol for my Eagle Scout Court of Honor.
Oh, okay, sweet. Nice.
Yeah. There's a whole saga thing there that you can actually Google. It actually fell off, but there was a bill that was in my name. It was the Andrew Larochelle God, Country, and Family Act.
Okay.
Yeah, because there was this whole saga where they weren't. They were censoring. Because what happens is you get a plaque that says this was flowed over the Capitol, and then you can put a little customized message. And so my dad got, I think, 3 of them, and one went to my grandfather, who's a World War II vet, and it said, in dedication and service of God, your country, and your family. Mm-hmm. And they took out God out of it.
Interesting.
Without, telling us, and then we got it, and my dad's like, wait, what's going on? So come to find out, the architect of the Capitol, that's the title, who oversees that program, was just unilaterally censoring anything that had to do with religion.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it had been going on for a while, and then apparently Mike Turner, who was our congressman, heard about it and ended up calling my dad and was like, hey, I heard this happened, or I forget exactly what it was. My dad might have contacted his office to say like, hey, this is weird, what's going on? So long story short, they're like, okay, great, you've got an Eagle Scout trying to give a flag to his World War II vet grandfather, and they're censoring God. Perfect. We've got our pawn. Put him on all the news stations. So I was on CNN. I was on with Glenn Beck. I was on Fox. I mean, all over the place.
Oh, wow.
17-year-old Andrew. Yeah. And anyway, so I was more or less just the puppet in the machine, being like, don't do that. And then, Turner would jump in and then get into all the politic talk.
Dang.
But there's the story.
I'm surprised I didn't know that. Yeah.
It was when I was like 20 years old, it was like, oh yeah, look at me, find me on Fox. But like, I'm about to turn 35 and I'm like, who cares?
Please don't. Yeah. That's good. Man. Wow. So that flag has a story to it. Not just not just Eagle Scout merit, but like federal level complicated story to it. That's fantastic. Well, I want to welcome people into the Hey Brother podcast. I'm honored to be joined by a good brother and friend, Andrew Larochelle, which is, I think, that's the proper way to say it, right?
He said it right, people.
I said it. Okay, sweet. After, what is it, 7 years? 7 years of knowing each other?
Right about, yeah.
Yeah, I finally nailed it. So the last name. I know you get a lot of different renditions of the last name, but I'm excited to have you on the podcast. We tried to do a small podcast together because you're a financial coach. I'm in the Catholic psych world. We're like, let's talk about sex and money. That, like, we did 4 episodes. I don't even know what to call it. It was a fun time, but those are still kind of locked away on my computer somewhere. Maybe they'll come out. But it's good to have you here on this podcast, the Hey Brother podcast.
Yeah, and glad to be here.
Yeah, the questions I always kind of start off these conversations, these interviews with is tell me about yourself. And I know you a little bit, but like the folks listening to this probably don't know you that well. And so what makes Andrew Larochelle Andrew Larochelle?
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. So I was born in 1990 in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I got an older sister And we ended up moving to Dayton, Ohio when I was 3. So where am I from? I'm from Dayton, Ohio. I got maybe one memory of New Hampshire. It had to do with robots attacking me in my sleep. I don't know if it's a real memory or just something that was told to me. but Ohio's home. Man, what makes Andrew Andrew?
Will any relatives be upset that you call Ohio home?
Well, relatives be no. It was so funny, man. Like idiosyncrasies and speech patterns from different parts of the country. The two that because we moved when I was like 3.5, 4 years old. The two that stuck was it's a New England thing to say wicked, right? You're going to emphasize,
sure.
Oh, that's a wicked cup of coffee, right? So wicked, I even to this day I'll say it from time to time. But the other one, which is definitely more a New Hampshire thing than New England, idear, adding an R to the end of certain words. And I remember idear up until middle school, and then that's when people really started like, why do you say things funny? And then that's when you had that like self-awareness, like, oh, other people don't say that. So my cousins and everyone else, from early middle school started noticing even speech patterns they were more Midwestern by that point. So no, am I from Ohio? Yes, I'm from Ohio. They know I'm a Buckeye fan, and they know I'm a Bengals fan, and yes, I still like the Patriots, but I keep that under wraps.
Yeah. It's okay to like the Patriots now, though, because they're bad. So
Well, I got a taste of right what the rest of the country was feeling under the Brady dynasty, and now I'm sitting here like, don't let Kansas City win, and I was like, oh man, that's how everyone else felt.
Right. Yeah, and then they got beat 40 to 22. They got stomped, but.
That was shocking. It really was.
Yeah, it was good. I was hoping for a better game. I was hoping for the Eagles to win, but like it just like that and like the
more
national
competitive
championship of this year, like the Buckeyes versus Notre Dame. Like,
that's right.
Both those games, like the winner was pretty evident from the start.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah. But that's football. That's not Andrew. What makes Andrew Andrew besides living in Ohio now and being from the East Coast and saying weird things like idear?
Yeah, no, it's funny, right? Because that question ultimately is getting to identity, and man, that's an interesting question. I think some things that make me me is like stuff that's just in my DNA. I come from a family of musicians, and I am a musician. Without a doubt, that's been. From the time I was walking, my mom had me at the piano, learning to play and all that stuff. And so that's definitely part of me. And I think so many like quirks that I've got, when people say like, oh, you're a Smith and this is how a Smith acts. It's so funny. I was just talking to someone recently about that. Like, what does that mean? Like, I'm a Larochelle and I act a certain way, right? And I think stuff that was really, like instilled from young age, like family is super important. My wife and I, we've got 4 kiddos, and we've got the 5th on the way in April, so that's very exciting. And so like family is a huge part of who Andrew is, and I think things like obviously faith is a big part of who I am. But yeah, I mean, gosh, we could talk about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, take me into like. So identity. That question strikes to the heart of like, okay, who are you? And I like to ask that to guys. One, because like it's good to start stirring. Like, because a lot of guys, myself included, like we don't wrestle with that question enough. Like, who do I say that I am? Like, who does God say that I am? And so like that question alone can just be like, oh yeah, like who am I? And so that's something that I would invite guys who are listening right now even to like wrestle with that question a little bit. But take me into like. What was the story that kind of built some of those identity pieces for Andrew? Like, you said you were a musician. It's part of who you are. I know a little bit about that, like, because your mom is a musician as well, right? So, like, but like, what was the story behind that?
Okay, so I'm going to bring you back a couple generations real quick, just because I think it's a great story. So my grandmother, born in, I want to say 1921, so Depression era baby, all that kind of stuff, right? She was like the middle of oh gosh, was it 15 or 16 kids, all born on a farm, like, right, one of those crazy stories. And she would, obviously there was no money, but she was learning how to play the piano. So the funny thing was, and she had them, she passed away a couple years ago, but all the way to the end, she still kept those papers where she would go to the library, get a piece of sheet music, bring it home, okay? And then she Xeroxed it.
Yeah.
By hand. She took sheet music and wrote note by note as she's illegally photocopying. But, I mean, give her credit. She worked for that.
That's awesome.
And so that was my grandmother. And I just remember encouraging all of us cousins. Right. So then, right, it's so much more than music, right? Music is family for us. Yep. We would get together every Christmas. And, you know, I had an uncle that played the drums, an uncle that played guitar, and we would all get together and at Christmas and just play and sing for hours on end. And so, yeah, music became just part of my DNA. And so that's interesting, too, because then, like, music took on different shapes over the years and meant something different for me along the way. I ended up going to college and studying music technology, but I did it as a bachelor's of music, which means I still had, like, performance requirements and weekly lessons and all that kind of stuff. And so it was interesting where, like, when you're younger, it's all about...
What was the degree title? Hey, if you're looking to grow in faith, fight self-doubt, and step into the man God's created you to be, I've got something for you. As a way to thank you and every man listening to the Hey Brother podcast, I put together a free guide called 7 Tools for Becoming the Man God Has Made You to Be. It's a simple yet powerful resource to help you build stronger brotherhood, strengthen your faith, and live more radically free. To grab your free resource, go ahead and type tools in the comment section below. That's TOOLS, tools in the comment section below, or email me tools with the subject line at nick@craftitformore, and I'll send that document straight to you. Now back to the episode.
Music tech.
And how does that, so you said it was still kind of performance, but like what's the difference there? I'm not super familiar with
so
music.
It was music technology. The better way to talk about it is like music production, sound reinforcement. So it's learning how to be in a recording studio, how to put albums together, and then live sound reinforcement and all that kind of stuff. So but I did it as a bachelor's of music, which meant I still had to have weekly lessons and my performance requirements for all that kind of stuff. So it was like I didn't want to do a performance degree because, I mean, the guys and girls that were going through the program doing performance, they were at the instruments 8 to 12 hours a day. Wow. Easy. Wow. Yeah. I was like 3 to 4, and that's where I maxed out.
Yeah.
But it's okay, because I was going to go to Chicago or Nashville and record with Matt Mars, so that was the skill set I was building.
Yeah, you don't need to be you just need to be good enough for Matt Marr, right? You don't need to be at the top.
Sorry, Matt, we're offending your musicianship right now.
Was that always like a kind of like a choice that you went into? Like, you're like, what's the question I'm asking here? Like, were you free in that choice of like, I want to go into the production side, or was there kind of an intimidation factor on like seeing people do 8 to 12 hours and like, I don't know if that's like what I want to do / like, can I do that? Like, is that, what was that choice?
That's interesting. Like? That's interesting. Well, was there a choice to enjoy music or not? In middle school, the answer was no. My mom said, you must practice or else. High school, I would say I really kind of took it on my own, and it became a passion and a love. But then in college, there was an intimidation factor, but there was like coming out of high school, like for my little pond, I was at the top.
Right.
So like there was this arrogance and confidence, like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
And then, you get dumped into this college where it's like, okay, well, you got the best or, really good people from their ponds and put them together. And all of a sudden it's like, there's a little bit of a gut check of like, okay, I'm not as cool as I thought I was. There are people that have been doing a lot more than me, have a greater skill set. So there was certainly, it was an interesting blending of cockiness and then kind of being put in your place simultaneously.
Yeah, well, because you went to like a school that was known for music, right? Like that.
Yeah, so I went to a conservatory, which is a little bit more intense. So there's some jockeying that goes on, like
Yeah.
it was actively like people competing to get into different spots and different bands, in the jazz program in particular, and like trying to beat people out to get into the better band and stuff like that. So there was definitely a competition factor. I'll never forget. It was freshman orientation, and one of the professors, he gets us all in the room, and he's like, all right, count off 1 to 5, I think it was. And he was really intense about it. All right, all the ones stand up. Great, you dropped out before the end of your first semester. All the 2s stand up. All right, you all dropped off by the end of your first year. And like he went down until only the 5s were left. Like that was our introduction to, yeah. And so they definitely, it was interesting because there's some similarities to military in some ways.
Okay.
And so one of the things that they would tell us is we're gonna tear you down to build you up. Now we can discuss, the merit or not of that model, but that was the model.
Dang, that's intense. I always think of because we've talked about this a little bit in our conversations over coffee, but I always think about the movie Whiplash when I hear you talk about school. Cause
I watched it and I might have had PTSD.
yeah, I mean, because what you're saying, that movie captures pretty well. It's a really good realism, as far as a film goes, capturing the reality of something. At least from what I didn't live it. You lived it, and you give the testament that it caused some PTSD, which, for better or worse, that's accurate. But this cutthroat nature of the music world, you living in it, part of that was your college experience, but so did you make the choice, I guess, even prior to jumping into school? I actually want to do the engineering or the sound production side versus performance, even going into school, or was that kind of a choice you made at school?
No, that was a choice I made beforehand. So that's interesting. I honestly didn't think I had what it would take to be a performance major. And I really wanted to record music. I was doing that a lot at the end of high school. And I was like, I really want to get into recording my own music. I want to record praise and worship and do all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I would say that was definitely an active choice to pursue that route, which was nice because then I am learning how to be a performer, but I've got the technical skill set as well. And it was a nice blending.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe even sounds safeguard it from some of the toxicity, but
yeah, to a degree.
Yeah. Maybe not. I don't know. What did you?
It was a different feel in the music tech realm, man. Let's just be honest. There was a lot of weed going around.
That's funny.
So there was some. So it's funny. It's both laid back, artistic kind of stuff going on, but then also striving for perfection.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting as you build a skill set. That skill set was our ears.
Mm-hmm.
And it was you're sitting there and, did you hear that? Hear what?
Yeah. Yeah.
But somebody else's ears are so much more developed that they're there's an imperfection right there. You got to get rid of it. So it's an interesting blending of the two. But I mean, think about, watching anything or listening to music that's professionally produced. I mean,
yeah,
they don't mess around.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, so it makes sense that there'd be weed in that scenario because it's as soon as you stop being perfect and you start to feel that sharp edge of I'm not perfect, I need something to cope, and it'd be really easy to be in it, and then as soon as you're not, all right, that was a lot of pressure, I need to go treat myself, right? Whatever the case may be. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So you did 4 years at school, and then what was life like beyond that? Was there anything else significant in school with identity stuff, or was it
goodness, yeah. And I think the big one was the faith journey. Cradle Catholic. Growing up, went to Catholic schools, both grade school and high school, and got into high school, and it was just such a stark contrast in a lot of ways, a lot of culture shock. And again, right, you go off and it's like the scene in Braveheart at the end, right? William Wallace is freedom. It's like, well, you've never had it before. What do you, and not at all, but it's like, oh my gosh, what do you do with this? And I think for me, the big thing was I went from being a cradle Catholic, being really involved in all the retreats and all the programs and everything that my high school offered, to my sophomore year of college. If you had asked me, I would have told you I was agnostic. God didn't exist. Or he existed just because the Big Bang didn't make enough sense to me. But he certainly wasn't involved, right? That was a huge identity shift. And I remember I took one of those core curriculum classes, right, that everyone has to take. What was it? Or the gen eds. It was a neuroscience class.
Okay.
And the professor was so in your face. Religion is a fiction of the human psyche to cope with a difficult reality. And I grabbed it hook, line, and sinker. I really did, despite everything that I had growing up. But I think if I was honest with myself, it was so that I could live the life I wanted to live without consequences. Yeah. And if God doesn't exist or doesn't care, well, great. Then there are no rules. We get to do whatever we want. Yeah. And that ruled my life for the next 2 years. Let me quantify it a little bit. As I decided to live my own life how I wanted, my GPA in one semester went from a 3.9 down to, I think it was like a 3.2.
Okay.
In one semester.
Yeah.
Okay, that tells you what those averages were.
Yeah.
And that it swung, okay?
Yeah.
It was fascinating.
So
anyway, well, it was something. Not showing up for class for like 8 weeks, that'll do it.
But you get to do what you want, right? Like that's you're your own man. It's interesting. It's easy to buy into that argument, though, right? That the neuroscience 100%. Professors thrown out there. That derives from what was it? Who said that religion was the opium of the masses?
Karl Marx, I think.
Marx, yeah, right. Like that's Marxism, right? Like it's easy to kind of buy into that idea that like this is just an advanced, sophisticated measure or coping measure, right? But you can look by the fruits that it didn't work out. Like, take me into and I think you were going there, but continue the story. Like, what led to that being realized? Like, this isn't the right way to be living.
Oh, I was miserable.
Yeah,
I was miserable, and I knew it. But what do you do? Like you were talking, and again, weed and all that. That wasn't necessarily my scene, but drinking sure was.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, I got to cope. And I don't know, I just had this moment where I was like, I've been coping for so long, and it sucks. And I don't want to cope anymore. And I don't remember exactly what triggered it, but I was subleasing a buddy's apartment at Ohio State between my junior and my senior year, and I was just like, something's got to change. And I just started going to the Newman Center for adoration almost every day after work. And I remember just sitting there feeling like I was talking to a brick wall. But I was like, sitting here feeling like I'm talking to a brick wall already feels so much better than the life I was living. And that says something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. So then my senior year was just this progression of just diving a little deeper into my faith. And it was really like I had to just act. I had to do something even though I couldn't feel anything. Mm-hmm. There was just because I just knew from my childhood that there's something true there, and I just got to find it. And one day it was just like all of a sudden grace started pouring out. And, I didn't have the words for it at the time, but realizing, oh, this is consolation.
Yeah.
And this feels nice.
Yeah.
A lot better than what I was doing before. Yeah. So then that was a whole thing of then getting involved with a whole bunch of organizations, both Catholic and Protestant, and then eventually getting involved the year after graduation with Net Ministries and doing a year as a team leader for them. And that just kind of set me off on the trajectory to where I am today.
Yeah, man, oh man, that's a wild journey. Like through, I don't think it's too dissimilar. Like I love doing the Hey Brother podcast and talking with guys because a lot of it does come back to that pinnacle identity point of like I'm leaving home, and like a lot of what I'm living all of a sudden becomes like challenged, or like every like thing that I grew up around me like is no longer around me, and now what do I believe about life? What do I believe about myself? Am I just a musician? Am I more than just a musician? Like these questions we start to wrestle with in those early 20s years, and a lot of times like we can get stuck in that kind of wrestling for most of our life. Here you got an example where like things started to break through a little bit and started to change. What was the change? Like I want to talk about brotherhood at some point. I don't know if brotherhood plays a role in some of that change in net or like other places. But if you can take me into what were some of those key movements of change, and then if brotherhood ties in, great. If brotherhood's another separate conversation, that's great too.
Yeah. I think praise God, I had some good people in my life all the way that were okay with challenging me.
Yeah.
So, one of my closest friends, I've known since definitely kindergarten. We may have been in preschool together too. And we didn't go to the same universities, but we were 10 minutes apart. So we spent a lot of time together. And there were moments where he and others just sat me down and were like, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure this is what you want to be doing? I'll never forget. I mean, they almost had an intervention with some decisions I was making. And they were just like, you need to pull your head out of your butt. They used other language. I'll spare that for right now.
If we need to add an explicit tag to the episode,
yeah.
My brother's on here like swearing like a sailor every other week. So, but yeah,
but I mean, and they did, and they were like, "If you do this, you're an idiot." And I made my own decisions, and I did it anyways. And I think that was then what led into that. Okay, this isn't working moment. So I am. I mean, to this day, I'm very grateful for those relationships where people were okay, where there was that level of intimacy that they could challenge and know that I'd be okay with them challenging me.
Yeah.
And then, net was that's a whole nother beast.
Oh, yeah. Net's a wild time for anyone who's an alum. But that you said that challenge came from pretty much early in life, and then throughout all of life, like same people or different people kind of offering that?
The guys that I'm thinking about right now, we did scouts together from Cub Scouts all the way through high school, Eagle Scouts, all that kind of stuff. So we've got a lot of shared life experience together. It's interesting. I was thinking about those relationships as we were preparing for today, and how there's been seasons where those relationships have been really surfacey, and other seasons where they've been deeper. And I think I've always had that craving for, like, small talk is fine.
Sure.
But I like talking about the big things. I like asking big questions and all that kind of stuff. And so to greater and lesser degrees through life, and then the specific example I was talking about before, where they really called me out and essentially almost had like an intervention. Those were friendships that were formed in those high school years that carried into college, both guy and girl friends from those high school years. So
you have me interested. You don't have to share it, but like on the whole intervention thing, I'm curious what the story is there. Again, if it's not podcast material, like we don't have to go there. But I am, like, you alluded to it a couple times, and I'm like, what's big enough to make someone need an intervention?
I hadn't thought about whether or not I wanted to share those details or not. It just organically came up, and that was kind of my low. Was I was doing a lot of hiding and lying to try to cover stuff up. That situation, I'm not going to get real specific, but essentially chose to move in with a girlfriend, and some other stuff that in situations that were revolved around that, and just basically everybody in my life was like, "That's the worst decision, Andrew, that you're coming to." And then I was working for a Christian organization, and it was just interesting because like the whole time I was like, I've got to lie day in and day out about what's going on beyond my life, and it prevented me from building relationships with those that I was working with and the broader community. And that was one of the moments that in the midst of that was like, this ain't working.
Yeah.
The world tells me I should be happy because I get to do whatever I want. And I'm happy on the outside, but I'm miserable.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that is like such a relatable like feeling. I mean, every situation, every person's unique and different, but like such a relatable feeling where it's like, if people really knew like what my life looked like I wouldn't be working here anymore. I wouldn't have any friends. I wouldn't like XYZ, right? Like it just like run it down the list. And I think a lot of guys struggle with that. Like it's like if you really knew like what I'm dealing with, like would that be okay? Like it's so easy to kind of fall into that moment where we feel like part of our life is just like a lie. And like for you, it sounds like it was complicated, right? There's I mean, every guy, it's complicated, but it's almost like there's a part of us that's like, I gotta make this decision. Like I know everyone's telling me not to, but it's like I've got to make this decision because it's what I feel like is the right thing in the moment, even though there's people saying it's not. And in retrospect, you can see like, yeah, maybe that was the wrong mistake. But if you go back into that mindset as whenever you made that decision, it's like there was a part of you fighting hard for making that decision despite having good counsel around you. So thank you for sharing it, because I think it is really good that guys see that it's not an uncommon experience to feel like this part of my life is a lie.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting for me. Like I feel like I really did a 180, because then my senior year of college, like I said, I started getting involved in a lot of organizations. One of the ones was Campus Crusades for Christ. It just happened to be the largest faith-related organization on my campus, and they did praise and worship, so I was all about it. Yeah. And it was that to then, the life I was living the year before to, all right, now I'm giving witness talks, laying all my dirty laundry out for 150 people. And, we're starting all these small groups and doing all this stuff, talking about our sexual struggles, talking about isolation and all this kind of stuff, which then led into then my year with NET. And I think what you could just summarize that entire year was learning complete, I don't even know how to, vulnerability is the word, but it doesn't seem weighty enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like just
abandonment, like abandoning yourself fully.
Totally. The only way that I know to find healing is to find guys that, because I've been hiding for so long, where I can lay it all in it. And I did. And, there were moments that were very grace. There were moments that were very hard. It was interesting too, because on my NET team, there were 4 guys, myself included, but I was the team leader. Mm-hmm. So the dynamic was, albeit it was a little different.
Sure.
Because I'm still leading the team with my co-leader. But there was still that, again, trying to be totally vulnerable and honest and sincere with those guys. And it did bring a lot of healing. And I think if I'm honest, I've struggled to find that level of honesty, vulnerability, past that, into adulthood. I do have a group of guys that, I get together with every Tuesday morning for prayer. We started doing Exodus 90 together. That's how we came together, and we just kept it going. And so we're in year 2 together. So that's building, and being patient with that takes time. But I'm finding how much I crave that authentic vulnerability with other guys.
Yeah.
And in those moments where we do have that, I'm always surprised, and I shouldn't be surprised, how grace-filled they are.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right.
It's such a gift, right? Like to actually have that, and I think there's a lot of times where I can look back and have had that and taken it for granted, like that moment to be vulnerable with guys, and particularly too, like with my brother Mitch, right? He's only a year apart from me, and so him and I are very much in the same phase of life in a lot of ways, and we get to share vulnerably with each other about things. And so part of our endeavor of creating the Hey Brother podcast was like, we know this is a gift, and we're trying to live out that gift a little bit better by welcoming people into our conversations as brothers, but then like doing this side of it too, right, where we get to hear, like I get to hear your story, and I've heard it before, right? We're friends, and like and that's something that I'm grateful for, is like we do get to share a pretty vulnerable relationship, especially since our careers are aligned in a lot of ways, and so like even within our relationship, I can take that vulnerability for granted, but it is such a gift, right, to actually like be able to share that. And I think every guy is hungry for that, right, to actually let themselves be seen. And it's so easy to settle for the surface level conversations. Like there's something safe there, right? Like I really don't need to go any deeper than I have to, right?
It's safe, and it doesn't take any effort.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and I think that's the thing that gets me is, I forget who it was, one of the Greeks, right? Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. One of them had this whole thing about like hierarchy of pleasures. And like there are really low-level base pleasures that are quick, instant gratification stuff. Obviously they weren't thinking about, iPhones and social media and all that stuff back then, but it's like, I can get a quick hit of dopamine, hop on social media, watch some funny videos on YouTube, or I can I'm reading right now, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
You got to sit with some of that stuff and really think about it. It takes work. It's harder than just hopping on my phone.
Yeah.
But the effects, the rewards of those work, it is much more pleasurable and enjoyable to do that. And so I think that's part of it too, is we don't work for enjoyment these days.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're just so immersed in it, right? People grabbing our attention, entertaining us. Yeah.
Constantly.
I've got a hot take on the Latin Mass for that, so I don't want to create riffles in my audience. I think if you go to Latin Mass, great, praise God. If you go to Novus Ordo and like just your traditional Sunday Mass, great, praise God. If you're not Catholic and you're listening to this and you go to church on Sundays, praise God. But there's something like about like being entertained on Sundays that I think like you could fall on any of those categories. Any groups could fall into that, where it's more about consuming beauty than it is actually participating in beauty, and I that's what my head thought of when you're talking about it. It's a lot easier to consume than it is to, like, even like when you're talking about reading New Christianity, there's a participation in that, right? You're engaging your intellect to chew on these ideas.
Correct.
Like that take effort, but there's participation in it, and I think there's something really, really profound about that.
Yeah, 100%. So it's almost like, in a lot of ways, it's like it feels like the cards are stacked against you.
Yeah.
I mean, the way, the norms that we've created as a society. So that's where, like, I do appreciate, even within the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith, like some countercultural trends that we see. It's because there's a recognition of, this is surfacey, this is superficial, and I want more. I want more. And I think at the end of the day, which is, maybe perhaps why we're even having this conversation, is that more comes in relationship with others.
Yeah. Say more of that.
Oh, gosh. So before hopping on the podcast, we were talking, are we pro AI or are we anti AI? And I'm going to fall in the anti AI camp. No, but it's like we as a society, as human beings, it seems that we keep replacing what would be, the pinnacle of different enjoyments, pleasures, good things that God has given in this world for lesser ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Sex within marriage is beautiful, but it's quicker and easier to go watch porn.
Yeah.
Okay. Running around outside and playing football as a family or with friends or whatever, that's fun. But let me just throw a Sunday game on and sit on the couch instead.
Right.
I mean, we could just keep going with examples. It's a fascinating thing. My kids love the movie The Incredibles. And in the second Incredibles, the villain in that movie, there's this fascinating monologue where the villain goes through this series of, you don't have relationships, oh gosh, you're going to have to like pull up the clip from the second Incredibles and insert it into the podcast because that'd be great. But it goes through this list of, here's the good thing, the real thing, but you keep choosing the lesser. You don't play games, you watch game shows. You don't do this, you do that. And it's so true. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, like I joke sometimes, and it's mostly a joke. It's like 60% a joke, maybe, that I just want to be a Catholic Amish.
Yeah.
When you had to plow a field with a horse or a donkey, you had a relationship with that animal.
Yeah.
But for efficiency, we create machines. You don't have a relationship with your truck. If you do, that's weird. I'm just saying.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
And that's where you balance these things. Because the flip side is like, I like penicillin. Praise God for CT scans that can discover. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You gotta wait. Yeah. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like a good to come back to balance. But I think there is something lost about relationship in like today's society where it's so easy to use technology to drift further and further apart. And like it's like important to see like it's not the tool that is like the problem, right? Like it's what it's allowing us to connect via podcast right now is like technology, which is great.
Yeah, this is like terrible. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't be able to put this out to the world. Like I'm signing off, Nick.
Yeah, right. Done. Pull the plug. But it's like, I mean, it's like also like how we make our livelihoods. Like you as a coach, me as like, and like, and not just like it's not for both of us. I know it's not just a fact of livelihood. It's like we want to change people's lives, right? Like, we want people to live more free, better lives, whether that be in the financial realm or like the interpersonal relational realm, and so there is a great benefit to it, but at the same time we're like very consciously aware of like, yeah, this could be such a driving force, like, and it's why I'm doing this podcast, like, fourth wall break here, right? Like I'm doing this because I know the guys who need to hear this are on the other side of the screen, right, or in the earbuds, like, because that's where people are going. Like they like to isolate. We as men particularly, we like to isolate. It's something that we like to do because we feel safer by ourselves. But our lives aren't filled. And like I love your story because like you experienced that and like you've seen that and like you like are highlighting now like that need for a relationship. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, the great irony of like vulnerability brings healing is that, to be vulnerable means that you open yourself up to being hurt, to being wounded, and so that it is a great irony. But you mentioned coaching. I'm going to pivot just a little bit. It got me thinking about it. All these conversations about like identity and brotherhood and relationship. In the realm of coaching that I sit with, financial coaching. Number one, it always kind of cracks me up. There's always a point in the coaching relationship where my clients say with some surprise, I'm surprised that we're not talking about money more.
Yeah.
But this is really what's helping me. And so, we talk about how what's happening with the finances is just a symptom of what's going on in other parts of our lives. And so when I think about this coaching thing first, personally, and this is fairly recent, within the last 6 months, I came to this realization that my identity had gotten rooted in my work, in my role as a coach. And it was a very arrogant thing. So it's interesting. I never made that connection, but you can kind of go back to my college experience with music. There was an arrogance coming into it, And so my wife and I, we had been working this program through our parish and then eventually on a retreat day. And I realized the theme of the retreat was surrender. And it came to me where my identity was so wrapped up in a very arrogant way of being a coach.
Yeah.
And I felt just so convicted in this moment of prayer on retreat to surrender my coaching practice to the Lord. Nick, I couldn't get the words out.
Yeah.
I surrender. I've never really had that experience before, but people talk about it getting stuck in their throat. It's like the word got stuck in my throat.
Yeah.
And it took me like 4 or 5 times before I finally got it out. God, I surrender my coaching to you. And then the waterworks started, and it was a blubbery mess the whole rest of the retreat, right? But my identity was getting so wrapped up in that. And it's so interesting. What are our measuring sticks as men in society?
Yeah.
Very commonly, it's our career, it's climbing the ladder, it's increased salary, what am I bringing in? And man, and again, it's not that these are bad things. In and of themselves, They're goods. They're actually good. But that's where I see so many folks struggling, is just like I got my identity mixed in with coaching, it's how have I taken my eyes off the prize, ultimately Jesus, right?
Right.
But then all this up my career, so it's like, why can I work with one client that's making $50,000 a year and they're making gobs of progress in their financial lives, but then I'm working with somebody who's making $250,000 a year and the hole keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Right.
So often it really is tied into my identity, my sense of worth, and all these other things that I think it was Augustine. I don't know if that's a paraphrase. We all have a God-shaped hole in our hearts. I know that the longer quote, Augustine said, my heart searches restlessly and finds no rest till it rests in thee.
Yeah. Yeah. That it seems like it would be a good paraphrase of that, God-shaped hole in the hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think I think it's so easy to place our identity in what we do and instead of like who we are, right? And that's what you're saying. What's that measuring stick? It's so easy to be like, if I'm not doing good at my job, if I'm not even like in a sense being good as a husband, like I mean that's a tricky line to walk, right? We want good husbands, but even like placing our identity too far there, if I'm not advancing up that ladder, if I'm not making more money, like then who am I? And that question, like I think resonates with a lot of men's hearts, and it's like tricky because it's like you experienced it, right? It was 6 months ago. It comes back. It's not just like a one and done process, right? Like, and I'm included in that group too, right? It's so easy to forget, right? That like where is our identity lying? And it's like this ongoing coming back to shedding different masks, shedding different things of our lives to like really like actually get in touch with that deeper reality. So, I think there's a lot there for guys to kind of chew on, and as we're kind of closing into like the end of the episode, one question I like to ask guys is like, what is one area that you want to work on as a man, as a husband, as a father? Like, where do you feel like the Lord might be challenging you to grow?
I have to pick one.
Yeah. One, just one. This has to be the most pressing one. Or you can pick two. That's what happened in the last interview. Bobby's like, I'm going to pick two. I'm like, all right, go for it.
It's so funny. I've, over the last 6, 8, 10 months, I've been doing a lot to try to wrestle with, what's going on inside of Andrew. Where do I need to grow? And so I've got a spiritual director. I've got my men's group. I hired a coach to help me find my blind spots and roadblocks and work through them. I was going through this program at our parish, and I got to a point of like self-reflection overload.
Yeah.
So all the things are surfacing, and I think one of the things that I discovered through that, that's going to be a lifelong battle, is improving in authenticity. What do I mean by that? I mean, let's start with the domestic church. Well, let's start with myself, right? It's first, in my relationship with God. Do I come with that vulnerability that I seek to have in even my human relationships and have that authenticity there? In my relationship with my wife, we've been married for 8 years, and I think we get into rhythms and patterns that just become kind of habitual. It's like it's not authentic anymore. It's just I'm going through the motions. With my kids, same thing. Am I just doing what needs to get done because it's on the checklist, the to-do list, or am I truly being authentic with them, loving them in each individual moment? I mean, you just keep broadening that out into my extended family, my professional life, and beyond. I still find that there's something in me. It's so easy to put that front back up. Smiling face is there again. And not that, we got to walk around being like, today's a bad day, and I need everyone to know it's a bad day. Okay, we know people who do that. That's not what I'm advocating for.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to that authenticity, that everything else that I would like to work on and improve, it feels like it's all stemming from that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, like that desire to let yourself be seen more fully as you are. And that just reminds me of, like, because as you're talking about how it radiates out, right? It radiates out.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of a lot of times when I'm working with folks, I always come back to, like, what are we doing here? Like, we're growing in relationship first with ourselves, and then others, and then ultimately God, right? Like it radiates out. It's like, if you can first be authentic with yourself, right, that makes a lot easier to be authentic with others, and that's the training ground. Like, others is the training ground for a relationship with God, essentially, right? Like, if you struggle at any point of being authentic with yourself, with your others, like, it's going to be really hard to actually be authentic with God, even though you think you might be, right? Like it's like there's still like an area where it's like, well, I don't know if I'm actually being authentic here. But I think that's a great thing to want to grow in, and I think a lot of guys can take inspiration from that, like myself included. Like, how are we leaning into letting ourselves be seen, both in the good moments and in, like, the not good moments? And, like, how can we lean into authentic brotherhood? And like, something like, yeah, we've got a Discord server, and I'll throw that in the show notes. Like, join the Discord server. If you don't have brotherhood around you, like enter into the brotherhood that me and Mitch and every guest that's coming in here, like, offering. Like, we want guys to experience the chance to have vulnerability. And if that's too scary, put an anonymous comment down on the YouTube video. Like, do something to enter into brotherhood, because I think it's really important that we let ourselves encounter each other. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you the chance, Andrew, to talk a little bit about what you do as a financial coach, and let folks know where they can find your information for coaching.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So one of the worst ideas is when you don't know what to call your business, you just go with your last name that nobody can pronounce in the Midwest. So it's just Larochelle Financial Coaching, LaRochelleFC.com. I'm sure you'll have my name so you can find it. But what I got into financial coaching, I have a strong passion for the domestic church. If families are strong, our societies are going to be stronger. And there's so much that comes at families and married couples these days. And I've always been financially minded, always been very, very frugal and planner and all that kind of stuff. And so it was just this very natural step to wanting to support couples who are trying to figure out their financial lives. And what's cool about the financial coaching, like I said, is it's so much more than just, I teach you how to budget. There's a budget tool. But we really dive into what are those roadblocks? What are those limiting beliefs that are like, I want to accomplish this goal, but I can't get there. I've been trying to get there for a couple of years, right? And so as a coach, just being able to walk with people and help them uncover for themselves these limiting beliefs and these roadblocks. And so often it's the stuff we tell ourselves, right? Because it's the stuff I tell myself that holds me back. And so it's a pretty humbling thing to be able to walk with people. And honestly, an area of life that most people aren't comfortable talking about, money,
Right.
and being able to open some doors. And one of the best comments that I'll get from a client isn't, "Hey, great, we paid off another $500 this month." It's, "Hey, my wife and I talked about money, and it didn't end in yelling and screaming."
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Amen.
That's awesome. Sweet. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing everything in today's episode. Thanks for sharing your story, sharing about what you're doing as a financial coach. I'll put that link in the description for anyone who is interested in looking at what Andrew does as a financial coach. And then thank you for everyone who's listening to the episode right now. If you guys find this a blessing, it means a lot to me. It means a lot to Mitch, to like, subscribe. And then if there's brothers that you know that could use this episode, this particular episode, feel free to share it to them. Send them a link or send them a text. Something that we can do to encourage other guys to get in relationship with each other. That's what we're all about as we journey to become more the men that God's created us to be. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.